Welcome inside Studio A for a special edition of All-American because this is schedule release edition. We have a football schedule, and I'm Maria Trivelpiece. This is Kyle Youmans. We're going to break that whole thing down for you right now. But Kyle, I can't believe we're talking about football already.
I know. Even having the football in hand today is a little bit of wild for me because we're still in the middle of hoop season, but the schedule does come out in the final week of February. And oh my goodness, we've got a lot to break down because it's the first ounce of football that we're going to have in 2026, and it's exciting. You kind of get that training camp itch back, but then we got to wait a couple months to scratch it.
I was already, when I was prepping for this, I was like, oh my goodness, we're back in the swing of things. No pun intended. It's baseball and softball season, but we're back in the swing of things, taking a look at who the coaches are, how that's going to impact teams, the different players that left and came to new programs. So I don't know, there's a lot to talk about. We won't break it all down. That would take us multiple hours. We're going to talk about the schedule primarily. And with that being said, we'll take a look at the big picture info with this schedule. There's 3 games for the American against 2025 CFP opponents, 6 games versus teams who are in the final 2025 AP Top 25.
Yeah, when you look at those 3 games, that's North Texas at Indiana, it's Charlotte at Ole Miss, and then East Carolina at Alabama, which will be interesting. May have even had a couple of American Conference foes facing off against Alabama, with South Florida having a game originally agreed upon. They have to reschedule that and change it up a little bit. But those 6 games against the AP Top 25, the final AP Top 25, of course, the American Conference had a couple teams in that AP Top 25. So really excited about the schedule. Of course, the first game begins August 29th, and you get conference play underway a couple weeks later. That championship game once again, and we can't wait to see where we're headed. December 5th next year, and then the Army-Navy game on December 12th. I think it's a very good possibility you could see Army-Navy twice, and we're going to talk about that game in a minute, and really the schedules that could lead to that championship game prior to Army-Navy in a minute as well.
Ever since Army joined the American and you have both teams in, you were just waiting for the day that they play in the championship game and then play in that Army-Navy game. We were close 2 seasons ago, so Army playing in it in 2024, I got to do the math in my head. I don't even know what year it is. And the fact that we got so close was so exciting. The way we're going to do all of these schedule releases, though, is in alphabetical order. So there's no favoritism whatsoever. We're going to go by the alphabet that we all learned when we were maybe 5 years old.
And that's why we're starting with UAB, because that's the alphabet that we learned, and it's UAB and the Blazers that get it started, right?
We're going with the B, the Alabama Birmingham of that, not the U.
Is it the A that's Alabama Birmingham?
I don't know.
What are we talking about here?
I don't know. We're starting with UAB, and let's take a look at this schedule. Kyle, when you look at all those boxes there, what's standing out to you?
Well, I think the number one thing is that you've got Alex Mortensen in town, and he had that big win against Memphis. So it's only fitting that they have to start on the road in conference play against Memphis. Of course, they've got that Navy game in Friday, or the Friday night game at home down in Birmingham against Navy. But then you go on the other side and you go at Memphis October 10th. That's going to be an interesting one because Memphis is probably still upset that they won the Battle of the Bones last year, and Mortensen keeps that job because of it. The big thing that stands out to me is that last stretch. I think at South Florida, at Temple, then you get UTSA at home, at North Texas. That's a tough stretch across the board. And you see a couple of those games here. You have to go in non-conference play against Illinois. That was a really good team last year. Illinois does not have Luke Altmaier anymore. He graduates, goes to the NFL, and of course, we'll see what he does in the NFL draft coming up in April. But these are 3 considerable foes to keep an eye on. And then you got those road tests later with Temple and North Texas.
I think Temple, and we'll talk about this when we get to them, is going to be one of the top teams in the American. And we don't know. We probably wouldn't have said North Texas would be in the champ game a season ago, and they proved us wrong. And so I think that being at Temple will be a big game for UAB, in addition to the ones that we have here. I'm so excited for that Battle for the Bones matchup. And with Alex Mortensen at the helm, he was the offensive coordinator before taking over the head job, and he was somebody that has been praised by the football community for his offensive mind. They hit the portal to get some more defensive players. That's a big part where they struggled a season ago. And so seeing what this new version of UAB will look like, we don't know, but I think these games that we've highlighted will certainly be good ones.
Well, I think you're going to see a more balanced team than you maybe had in the past. Of course, Trent Dilfer was a quarterback-heavy player or coach. Then you get Mortensen, who comes in. It still has the ability to coach quarterbacks and coach the passing game. But they're really excited about one of the transfers they got, Javen Simpkins from Coastal Carolina, running back prospect, 5'8", 185. He's lightning in a bottle. That's what they've been missing is team speed from UAB. I'm really excited to see how they do there. And then they revamped their offensive line. One guy that I've always liked during his time at East Carolina was Samuel Riddy Jr. He was a 3-star transfer offensive tackle, 6'6", 290 pounds. Transfers from East Carolina, stays in the conference, goes to UAB. So trying to revamp the trenches and run the football a little bit better.
And they returned their quarterback in Ryder Burton, who was Alex Mortensen's guy.
We love talking to him, too.
He was one of our best interviews on All-American. So if he has a season like that game he had against Memphis a year ago, it'll certainly be fun to see the way that he performs for the Blazers. Another team that returns their quarterback, the Army Black Knights. And, again, won the American in 2024. Were down a bit last year, but peaked towards the end of the year. That returning quarterback is Kyle Youmans, and there's that schedule that Youmans and the Black Knights will take on this year.
Yeah, look at that. It's the most evenly distributed just in terms of the colors on the graphic. It looks very nice, but then you got to read it from left to right. They have 2 home games, then 2 road games, then 2 home games, then 2 road games. And you go back and forth, and that's really interesting to see as we go along. But I really like the way that they've settled into the conference schedule because you've got that matchup with South Florida early. You're going to see that a lot with these Armed Forces teams, but you've got the matchup there. Then you turn around, you go at Temple, at Louisiana Tech in a non-conference game. Then you go Tulane, Florida Atlantic at home. I really like this schedule for Army because of the experience that they have. They get to catch 2 of the teams that we anticipate being the best in the conference early. Yep. This is not an easy schedule. I mean, they get all 4 of the powers in this squad from last year, maybe minus North Texas, which that game came down to the wire last year anyways. But they get them early and they get them at home. South Florida, then you go on the road at Temple, which is a little bit easier road environment to play in just because of the big stadium and it doesn't fill up. But our Army's going to be experienced. They're going to have that system down with another year under their belt, and rolling with Kel Youmans and what he did last year is going to be a big thing for them. And
they added new defensive coordinator Daryl Dixon, who has been on staff for the last 11 years, but he's taking over that coordinator role. And so we talk about the Army defense all of the time, and you bring up the offense, but I think that promoting somebody from within who already knows the system will help them even more. And when you talk about catching those teams at the top of the conference who we think could be some of the top opponents, I think Army playing them early is also an advantage for them because teams have to prepare differently when they play the Armed Forces schools. And so I think that adds an element of an advantage for them as well.
Well, yeah, you look at South Florida, they got Brian Hartline coming in, a lot of excitement around that, but his second game is going to go against the triple option.
Yep.
and we'll talk about the South Florida schedule in a little bit, but that's going to be a tough task, and I think Army benefits from that. Let's talk about Charlotte, the 49ers, trying to bounce back this year, second year with Coach Tim Albin and company. The 49ers, certainly a squad that I could see taking a step forward in 2026.
Well, they have the whole coaching staff back in terms of head coach Tim Albin and both coordinators, and I think that's consistency can help them. They're one of the teams playing one of the CFP opponents in Ole Miss. They have that they're the second game of the season, so a big test early on, but I think it's a program that I'm excited to see how they respond to last year. One of the reasons they struggled so much, Kyle, was because of all the injuries. And I know everybody deals with that, but I had them, I think it was the second to last week of the year, and they had, I think they were on their 3rd or 4th quarterback. So many people went down. So I would like to see a healthy Charlotte team. Tim Albin won during his time at Ohio. Can he do that again in Charlotte? I think he has the potential to if he can get his guys rallied around him.
Yeah, you look at some of the guys that they lost. I mean, they lose a running back like C.J. Stokes, who hits the transfer portal, but they bring in a couple of guys like Demarion Poteet and Kamani Alexander, Poteet from Coastal, and then Alexander from Appalachian State, a couple Sun Belt guys making a way over to Charlotte. And I think they're going to revamp from a roster that was a little frustrated at the end of the year last year, and you get some early tests. You're going to see Appalachian State. That's a really good mid-level group of 6 team. You've got the Ole Miss Rebels early. I mean, you just want to see growth going into those types of matchups. But I really like the way that the early part of the schedule pans out, but they've got one of the toughest schedules in the
Yeah.
American Conference. And look what they have to do at North Texas, at Temple, at Tulsa late in the year. And of course, we'll talk about Trey Lamb in a little bit. But this is a team that struggled last year. They lose a lot on the defensive side of the ball, but when you have a defense that struggled as much as they did last season, that's not necessarily a bad thing at times.
That was going to be my point. When you lose people from a team that didn't have success, it
You get
might
to
be rebuild, revamp, and that's what Charlotte's going to try to do. East Carolina also needs to rebuild and revamp a little bit. They lost their quarterback. They also have 2 new coordinators under Blake Harrell and his staff. Jordan Davis coming in, he was the OC at North Texas a year ago, and then Jordan Hankins will be the defensive coordinator, but you know Blake Harrell will have his handprints all over that defense.
Absolutely, and you already bring in a Miami transfer at quarterback with Emory Williams, 6'5", 225 pounds. Of course, he was a 3-star recruit as a transfer. Like that, Zaire Gamble is a fun safety product. They combine him with Miles Pollard. I mean, these are top 2 safeties, maybe in the transfer portal, that were available for East Carolina. Yes, you got to play in Tuscaloosa. Yes, you've got to play Old Dominion, who was a really good Sun Belt team again last year as well, and a team that we talked about multiple times in playing American Conference foes. But I really do think East Carolina is going to bounce back in a big way. Blake Harrell, we've talked about him before. He can win football games. He can coach football. He got a significant amount of transfers, especially in the portal, that I think they believe in. A lot of guys from Memphis, too. A couple guys from North Texas. We talked about Landon Sides a lot with the Mean Green last year in that highly vaulted offense. He goes over there. They take their coach as well in Jordan Davis, who was a big part of that offense under Eric Morris. He's now the offensive coordinator with the East Carolina Pirates. So lots of moving and shaking even within the conference, and then they're going to get a chance to see those guys as well.
It's so interesting because Blake Harrell took coordinators from 2 American teams. Hankins coming from Memphis, bringing those guys, and we saw the Memphis defense last year, especially early in the year, look really good.
Yeah.
And so I think that, to your point, Blake Harrell knows how to win football games.
He does.
And so I don't care what players are underneath him. I mean, you mentioned a few. I think looking at the way that he's won, looking at this schedule too, I like this schedule for them because, yes, you start off with Alabama, but then you have those big tests at the beginning of the year. So the big conversation for the American is establishing yourself as a CFP team by playing Alabama, even in Appalachian State, and Old Dominion, who was good a year ago. I think that sets you up, and then you have a tough conference schedule as well. And so I think if East Carolina does their job and wins their games, they could be in that conversation that Tulane was in this year and even Army the year before.
Well, I think they also get the rare benefit of playing their non-conference games in 4 straight at the beginning of the year, and then easing into conference play, because you get those 4 non-con battles first. I mean, you could be 0-4, but they could still end up winning the American Conference by the time the season kind of rolls down to the wire. You get Rice at home, you get UAB on the road, then you go at Memphis, which is going to be a tough turnaround, I think, a couple times in the year, but you get a kind of a mini bye going into it because you play UAB at UAB on a Thursday in October, then you get Memphis on a Saturday. So a little extra time to get rested up and ready for what will be a big-time battle there. So still, when you look at the schedule, it's going to be tough, but I really like the way it lays out for ECU. And with the way that they have some continuity with the coaching staff, you bring in a chance to weaken the other schools. That's the other thing about these cross-conference transfers and cross-conference coordinator changes is you take from one school, but you're also taking away from another school. Right. That's what East Carolina is going to benefit from.
And to your point, I think that they have that combination of those schools will allow them to also have some insight on what worked well and what didn't. And again, there's new staffs at both of those places, at North Texas and Memphis, but there's little things that maybe can help you. And if you're already a good head coach like Blake Harrell, any advantage helps.
And even just to keep it simple, one of the best offenses in the country last year was North Texas.
Yep.
One of the best defenses in the conference last year was Memphis. They bring guys from both of those to see what they can do on their offensive and defensive side of the ball with a head coach that they trust.
Let's talk about offense and Florida Atlantic, because when you talk about Zach Kittley and his returning quarterback, Caden Beltkamp, this could be a sneaky team in the American, and their schedule does not start off easily either, but they play an old American Conference head coach in John Summerall at Florida for game 1.
Yeah, he's going to be comfortable. He's going to know what Kittley does, and he's going to know kind of that team going into it. But I think Florida Atlantic can make a North Texas type of jump this year.
Okay.
The way that North Texas was a team that nobody was thinking about, nobody was talking about, even though there was some continuity there. But there still wasn't that overarching national storyline. And then, of course, North Texas makes the run that they do to the American Conference Championship. They fall to Tulane. We're right on the verge of making the college football playoff. I don't think it's out of the question that Florida Atlantic can do that. An American Conference team defeated Florida last year. It's part of why John Summerall's there in the first place, because South Florida beat them in non-conference play and kind of set the tone for the Florida Gators last season. It's not out of the question that Florida Atlantic can sneak up and win. Do I expect them to do that? Probably not. It's the first game of the year, and we'll see exactly what happens there. But you could really see Florida Atlantic making a jump with Veldkamp, who was one of the more electrifying passers in the game last year. They get a couple extra weapons on that offense that I like. They've as Florida Atlantic have had a tradition of really good tight ends. I have my eye on a guy named A.J. Johnson.
Okay.
He's a transfer from Villanova, second-level guy who helped really take over games at the FCS. He's going to take a step up and be a guy to watch out for. And Marcus Vincent, another tight end. 2 tight end sets in Zach Kitley's system with the way they spread things out at the wide receiver position. Ooh, they got some versatility now, and they're not just a one-trick, throw it in the air raid type of pony anymore. This is a team that's going to let it fly, but they're also going to win some games too.
They have a tough schedule though. When I was looking at it and determining who are the toughest schedules, I think anybody who has to play Army, Navy, and Rice is going to have not a tough time, but it's hard game planning. Those are 3 teams that run the option, and then they're at North Texas. They play South Florida at home, but they're also at Tulsa, who's a team we're going to talk about in a moment that I think could be one of the better teams in the American this year. So for me, I think Florida Atlantic starts things off hot with that game against Florida. Then they have a tough conference schedule, but as you said, I like the offense that Zach Kitley has put together.
And they're going to play a little bit of defense this year, too.
Okay.
Which wasn't the case last year. I mean, they struggled on the defensive side at times. Jonathan Bax is a transfer from TCU that I've gotten to watch in the past. 6'3", 245. He's got some bends. He's a possible NFL prospect type of talent. I think he's that good. And we're going to see what he can bring next year.
All right, lots of changes in the American, though. Another head coaching change at Memphis. Charles Huff is now at the helm of the Tigers program. This was a team a year ago that started off 6-0 and everybody was excited about, and then had some stumbles along the way. They're going to open things up, though, in week 0 against UNLV.
And if you know anything about what Memphis is getting in Charles Huff, you know that they're going to win.
Yep.
Because that's what he's done. He's won everywhere he's been. You talk about a tough schedule. This is probably one of the toughest in the conference. We're going to give our toughest schedule later. You may hear me bring up Memphis's name as a possibility there. But when you look at Huff, whether it was at Marshall or at Southern Miss, now at Memphis, they're going to get high-level transfers. They're going to win games. Talk about Alante Brown, wide receiver transfer from Michigan State. He was a 4-star coming out of high school. You get a 3-star tackle transfer from Indiana, national champion in Jamari Monette. Jabari Ismail, the edge rusher from Southern Miss, who was one of the best players on that Southern Miss defense, now playing for Memphis. I think if I'm a Tigers fan and you were a little disappointed the last couple of years of how you didn't make the American Championship or the American Conference Championship game, this might be a year where they can make a run.
And if they beat the teams that they have on their schedule in the American, that sets them up to be in that American Conference title game because, as you said, I agree with you. This might be one of the toughest ones in the conference. Those last 3 games at South Florida, at Navy, and then they host Temple. Those are 3 teams that I think could be at the top of the conference. So if you beat the other better teams, then you get to be in the conference championship game.
It's one of those things where if you're Memphis, you can't drop games you're not supposed to.
Exactly.
Because you're going to get battle tested. I mean, UNLV and Boise State are 2 of the better group of 6 teams, group of 5 teams that you want to have. And you turn around, you see the way that they played that game. Then you have the rematch that we talked about earlier, the Battle of the Bones. You got to turn around and win games like that, and then maybe steal a couple from teams that are above you in the conference standings or have been over the last couple of years. They have the number 3, according to 24/7 Sports, number 3 transfer class in the American Conference, only behind South Florida and North Texas. So they have the transfers to talk about it, but then you look at the recruiting ability, they're number 3 in that category too, only behind Tulane and Memphis. The only team, according to 24/7, that has a top 3 transfer and recruiting class. Charles Huff's a phenomenal in-game head coach. I think Memphis is going to be the real deal in 2026.
I will agree with you, especially based on everything that you just told me about the recruiting stats. A team that has no worries about the portal or recruiting or isn't focused on that is the Navy midshipmen. But they do have to focus on how they're going to reload from one of the best teams that they've had in program history. We're still sad about it. There's no Blake Horvath. There's no Eli Heidenreich, no Landon Robinson. They all graduated and are going to do tremendous things in their careers. And they have another pretty tough schedule this year as well. You're still mourning the loss of our guys, right?
I don't know if I can talk about this Navy team the same way that we have in the past. And you know what? I think they'll get over it.
I think they might be more emotional than you should be, but I think they'll get over it as well.
They're going to get over it. They're going to play their Navy brand of football, which means physicality and defense and discipline. I mean, all of that is going to be the case. In the last 2 years, we've seen what the transfer portal has done to college football. We've seen what NIL has done to college football. But we've also seen the way that these armed forces and these service academies have changed their way of doing things and just done them better. Yeah. I mean, Army, what they did winning the American Conference in 2024. Then you have Navy, who was tied at the top of the regular season, just lost a tiebreaker to North Texas because of one game that they played in Denton, but was just as good and then did what they did down the stretch in the postseason. I mean, I don't think we can count out the Navy midshipmen. And they actually have a favorable schedule. I know you see Notre Dame. I know you see the Army-Navy game, but they're going to have those two on their schedule all year long. When you actually look at the outmake and the outlook of their schedule, they get some favorable games. Their road games this year at UAB, at Florida Atlantic, not necessarily a tough place to play. At Charlotte, not necessarily a tough place to play. They get Army and Notre Dame in neutral site games. The one thing that I have scheduled or circled is they got to play at the Alamo Dome.
Right.
But that doesn't matter. The Alamo Dome curse does not apply to the service academy.
Clearly,
for some
Army
reason,
beat UTSA.
because Army wins games there, Navy wins games there, and for some reason it only applies to American Conference teams that aren't service academies. So maybe that's the case, and I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but I also kind of don't. So Navy, even with all that they lost, and we're going to see how they revamp it, it's hard to really tell what they have because the only people that know what the talent is in the building are the guys running the whole thing, and we don't necessarily see that until they step on the field September 5th against Townsend.
Well, we didn't know who Blake Horvath was really until he was a junior, and the impact that he had on that program, we talked about him at nauseum for the past 2 years, as did much of the nation, and so we really don't have any kind of idea what this Navy team will look like until they step on the field. And to your point, Kyle, last year we talked about Navy's schedule in November, and we said if they can get through this, they'll be in the American Conference Championship game. They dropped that one to North Texas. They had one of the toughest conference schedules a year ago. I think this year it's a bit more favorable, as you mentioned, and I think that could bode well for the midshipmen.
And remember, this is a team that did, outside of Blake Horvath, have some quarterback play from some younger players in the middle of the season. So they have the ability to maybe fall back on that experience. They did sign a guy that I really liked, Deuce Jefferson. He's out of Long Beach, California, in the 2026 class. You don't see a ton of high-level recruits going to Navy, but he's a dual-threat quarterback. He's one of the top dual threats in California. He was a 3-star recruit, and he committed over Air Force and the other service academies. So anytime that you're going to get a guy that could take away from Air Force and Army, then I feel like you've got an opportunity to do something special there. Let's talk about North Texas, who did something special last year. Completely new era in Denton, and they're going to have to start with the defending national champions who went 16-0 in 2025.
That's light work. I don't know why you say
they don't have
that.
Fernando Mendoza anymore.
Yeah, no, they just got the Hoover kid from TCU, who's also a highly rated quarterback, and Kurt Signetti, and but
how many games has Kurt Signetti lost? 2? It's like 35.
I think if you Google him, you'll be able to find out.
That's true. All he does is win. Right?
Exactly. But North Texas won a lot last year, and Neil Brown, new head coach there for the Mean Green, revamped his roster. He's really adamant about saying that this is a roster revamp, not a rebuild, because he thinks that this team can compete at a really high level in the American this year.
And they did it in a way that North Texas hasn't traditionally built their roster. When you looked at what Eric Morris did and had success in the last couple of years, they did it through high school recruits. Drew Messemaker out of high school, Caleb Hawkins out of high school, Wyatt Young out of high school. All of these guys were primary prospects from the high school ranks. This was a transfer portal class, and third in the American Conference out of the transfer portal behind those two schools that I mentioned earlier. I really like Jaheim White, running back from West Virginia, who played under coach during his time up in West Virginia when Neil Brown was a head coach in Morgantown. He is a next level NFL type of player and was a productive player in the Big 12. He's going to be electrifying, and we're going to talk about it at some point. Then you've got Justin Ditta as well, the quarterback that we
liked him
was
last year.
Swagger at East Carolina and won the bowl game against Pitt for East Carolina and the Pirates. He transfers and goes to North Texas, and kind of an odd trade between the Mean Green and the Pirates, I guess.
Yeah,
we're
right.
just doing trades
coordinator
now.
for a quarterback.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly how it went down.
Yeah, and then they get Justin Benson from East Carolina too, who's a part of that East Carolina deal, I guess. But you got transfers from Texas and from Cal and from SMU, from Virginia Tech, Boise State, App State, Utah. This is a team that built with Power 4 talent. They didn't necessarily get the recruiting element, the high school element that they wanted, but Neil Brown said, if we're going to replace experience and we're going to replace everybody that left in the transfer portal, one of the teams decimated by the transfer portal this year, they have to replace it with experienced talent, and that's what they went and did.
And I think that's the key for successful teams in this portal era is getting those players with experience. And it's unfortunate for some of the really good high school players because sometimes you might miss an opportunity, but I think you're looking in the portal for players with experience who can help you win just as you did a season ago, but now under a new staff in a new environment. And so I think adding in that experience will help them, especially with the schedule. They start off with Indiana, then they have UNLV, who we talked about, one of the better programs in college football. Their conference schedule, I think, is a bit more favorable. I mean, you see behind us, I think that Tulsa game is going to be one that will be fun.
You're making me laugh saying that this conference schedule is favorable.
I mean, I think somewhat. Okay, they're
you
at
see
UTSA.
Who they play on the road, Maria?
I take that back. They're at UTSA. They're at Tulane. They're at Navy. I lied. They're at Tulsa.
Oh my
as well.
goodness!
Let me just If this were not live, we could edit that out because that's not favorable. I lied to you all. This is a tough schedule.
This schedule's tough. I mean, you play Dan Mullen and UNLV early, which is kind of fun, like when it comes to like the college football playoff drama that you might see between group of 5 teams and the final bids getting into the field of 12. You need wins like that under your belt. You need to beat the other teams that are kind of equal in that mindset. Then you turn around and you play Indiana, of course, in week 1. You got at UTSA, road trips to Tulane, road trip to Navy. It's okay. It's okay. I just wanted to point out when you were like, it's favorable. I was like,
you're like, wait, no, I think you've been talking
favor
for
are we
too
talking
long.
about? Like they did a favor to the conference for somebody having to play those games?
If they win, it's favorable. If they win these games, they could be a CFP contender.
And maybe this is the case because everybody called North Texas's conference schedule a cakewalk last year. Times it might have been. But this year, not a cakewalk. They're going to have to earn it in year 1 of the Neil Brown era.
I 100% agree with you, and I was wrong, way wrong. And we're going to leave that on record as well as we talk about Rice. You ready to talk about Rice?
Talk about the Owls.
Look at that second game of the schedule. Another team in the American playing Notre Dame this year. They open up with Houston Christian. I like this challenge for Scott Abel's squad because I think in his first year, he's trying to figure out what he has, who he can win football games with. They end the year 5-7. They still get to play in a bowl game, and now they're building on that momentum, adding some good non-conference games, and then trying to compete in the American.
You mentioned the good non-conference games. They get the pay game going at Notre Dame, which will be interesting to see how that one turns out. South Bend, they're going to have to run the clock. They're going to have to use that triple option, that spread option that they like to run down in Rice at a high-level program like that. But then you get back-to-back really fun non-conference matchups. Normally they've had the Houston game that kind of takes up a spot there, but that game in the Bayou Bucket no longer on the schedule for the next couple of years. I'm sad about it too.
Fun.
But at least they replaced it with some fun games. Western Michigan's a team that the American Conference has seen recently and has been very good as of late. They were the MAC champions last year. Fresno State, a West Conference team that I think you kind of have some flair there too. But then look at the way they start the schedule. At home against UTSA, at East Carolina is a wild back-to-back that they've got. Tulsa at home as well. And then you look at what they do later in the season against North Texas and Tulane. At North Texas, Tulane at home. Then you get at Temple, at home against Army late. This is not an easy schedule for Scott Abel, who they did build out of the high school ranks. They were
Right.
better in their high school recruiting class than they were in their transfer portal class. Now, they got some guys. They actually have a Notre Dame transfer in Preston Zinter, who was a good edge rusher for Notre Dame. He was a 3-star transfer that goes to Rice and is looking to continue his education down there and play at a high level on the football field, too. You and I are both on the record of saying we are Scott Abel believers, and I think he will win games at some point in Rice. But this is a slow build. You don't want to overdo it early. You don't want to put yourself in a tough position with the easy schedules, and then you fall late. You got to play tough games early and build a winning culture and a winning program. That's what they did this year with the way that they started the schedule and the way that it lays out early.
And he's done that everywhere he's been. Take a look at the success that he had at Davidson.
Yep.
He built those programs. He needs to build players into his offense because the system works, but it takes a little bit to get it going. And the fact that year one, I think 5-7, that's a really good start. Now year two, okay, let's elevate that a little bit. We're getting more of our guys in the system that we want. Let's play a tougher non-conference schedule. Let's prepare ourselves for what I think is a tough American schedule as well. I mean, at least you get UTSA at home instead of playing them in the Alamo Dome, but at East Carolina, Tulsa at home, and then at Florida Atlantic, we talked about how that team could be a contender if their offense plays out how we think it's going to.
A couple of guys that I want to throw into the mix here. I think Gael Ochoa is kind of interesting to me. He's a quarterback from UNLV that I like. He's a little undersized, but they've played with undersized quarterbacks in the past and had some success there with Rice. And then Jesus Machado. One thing they have had at Rice is good linebacker play, and we've talked about that in the past as well. Linebacker transfer from Houston, played a little bit with the Cougars, and then goes across town to play at Rice. He was even a Tulane product initially as well. So see how that ends up happening. He was one of the guys that followed Willie Fritz from Tulane to Houston, and now he's back at Rice. And we'll see if he can add to that second level of the defense. Traditional build at linebacker, too. 6'1", 220, like what he brings.
Well, South Florida's hoping that Brian Hartline can add to the success that they've had in Tampa Bay. And the excitement around Hartline coming into the South Florida program has been enormous. I don't know if you've been taking a look at some of the social media.
I've been excited, too.
I've been excited to see what he does, but the fans in South Florida are so hyped for him, and the way that he's hit the transfer portal, the way that he's campaigned for this Bulls program, I think their reason for excitement is warranted.
Oh, it is warranted. And you look at the schedule, too. I mean, they start with kind of the slate that looks like a cakewalk. I mean, it's kind of what we talked about with North Texas last year. And part of it's not their fault. They had Alabama scheduled, and then when the SEC goes down to 9 games, that was one of the games they got nixed and one of the games that were taken off of the schedule. So I really do believe South Florida wanted to play the early echelon of high-end games, but when the late decision switched it up, South Florida was the first one to get taken off the list. And that's unfortunate for a team that beat an SEC school last year and that had the success that they did last campaign. But I love the Coach Hartline hire. I said it from the beginning. He was one of the best coaches on the open market. This is such a great fit for a team that does have the resources in this conference to make a run and to bring in some high-level talent. Michael Van Buren Jr., the quarterback from LSU, is one of the talking points because never had the chance to really play down in Baton Rouge because of what they had in Garrett Nussmeier and what he did at the SEC level. But Van Buren comes to South Florida, and you're trying to replace a guy like Byron Brown. He's the type of guy that can do that. Little undersized again. We talked about that a couple times in this and a lot of times you're going to see that with guys at this level. They're going to be undersized. They're going to be inexperienced. He's one guy that will have the talent level, though, that's going to spin this and throw this like crazy. And I think Coach Hartline's going to have the right play calls to put him in a spot to be successful. Not that he's the starter right now, but he's a guy that a lot of people are excited about.
And he'll have to do that against teams like Army and East Carolina and Tulane. Those 3 games on the schedule right there. Early game against FIU. It's the first one of the season. And so I'm excited about this South Florida team. I think that what Alex Golesh did to build that program the last couple of years, I think Brian Hartline comes in and just continues on that momentum. And I think that we'll be talking about South Florida later on in the season as we were this year.
And on the back end of this, there's also a guy that I really liked coming out of high school. He's from the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, Louisville, Texas, was a Louisville fighting farmer. His name is Armani Winfield. 6'2", 205-pound wide receiver. He's a 4-star recruit out of high school. He initially goes to Colorado State, who has a tradition of building great wide receivers and having success even at the level that they are at, and Winfield goes to South Florida, he might be a household name and somebody we talk about on All-American all year long.
All right, we might have to clip this in a couple of months. Kyle, we've clipped you before because you have been right.
Camera. Clip it.
Even though I don't like to admit that you're right, I will say you're right a lot of the time. Temple, I think I was somewhat right about Temple a year ago because I said I think that Casey Keeler is going to make an impact on this program, and he did in his first year with the Owls, and I really like their schedule because they have a mix of everything here. They open up with Rhode Island, but then they have Penn State in that second game of the season. It's at home. I think that's a fun one because those two teams, the last time that Temple played in the Link, or Penn State played in the Link, Temple won. They're two teams that fight for recruits in that Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. And I don't know, I think that with Casey Keeler at the helm, with some of the people that they returned, Temple could be a team that we talk about later on too.
You talked about being right with Temple. You were definitely right. They were a different team in 2025. I also ended up being right in saying that they were going to fall off at the end of the year because of the schedule that they had. That's not happening in 2026, in my opinion. This is a much better program that's ready to take a step into being a contender. Yes, this is not an easy schedule, and it starts with them down there at the end. The Nittany Lions, that is a tough game across the board. However, I think they have the talent. They're one of the best in-conference recruiting classes they've had in a long time. They had multiple 3-star transfers. They recruited high school exceptionally well, and they're building something. That's the biggest thing. Last year, if they would have made a bowl game, that was achieving or highly exceeding expectations and achieving something they didn't necessarily think was possible initially. Now they have the chance to build on that, and I think that's where they're going to be dangerous. They've got a chance to revamp the trenches. They've got a chance to revamp their skills positions, and people want to play at Temple again because of what Casey Keeler is building and what they've done to make Temple football cool again. And I'm buying in this year. I think you're right. I think this is a team that's going to be, when we're all said and done, a team that's going to make a major league.
I think we both had our moments to be right last year, and I think that they could.
It came at different times.
It came at different times, so maybe I was partially wrong in the second half of the season.
No.
But talking with Temple players a year ago, you just felt a different energy. Yeah. And starting with Evan Simon, they were so bought in to what Casey Keeler was selling in that program, and I think there's a reason why he's had so much success at Delaware, at Sam Houston State, because he builds programs. Yeah. He talks about it all the time. He's the CEO of the company, but it's a family-owned business. That's exactly how he describes it. And I think if he can continue to build on that, it puts Temple in a good spot.
No doubt. And I think they're going to lose a couple of guys. Of course, Memphis takes Casey Miles, a defensive lineman that had some success last year, and a couple of other players like Soltman Bodmas that had a good year. Ian Stewart hits the transfer portal. They're going to have to replace some dudes. But at the same time, I still think they're going to rebuild in a better way than they have in years past.
I agree with you. All right, UTSA, we talked about them a little bit on this show already. Just circle all the games that are at home. They'll probably be wins because that's what happens in the Alamo Dome, unless it's a service academy. They don't have Army this year. They do have Navy on the schedule, but I say that tongue-in-cheek, but there's also some numbers to back that up.
Yeah,
as well.
I feel bad. RGV, Colorado State, South Florida Navy, North Texas, Tulsa. It's a tough home schedule, actually, when you look at it.
It is. When you're like, oh, maybe not. Yeah.
They win
Nothing matters.
There.
Yeah,
and there's some kind of dark magic San Antonio stuff going on. I don't really know. But they do win games at home, and so that's the first thing you got to do when you look at the UTSA schedule, and that's a credit to Jeff Traylor. Jeff Traylor's one of, if not the most tenured coach in the conference now, I believe.
Probably.
Right? I think he is, because you look across the board and maybe Jeff Monken has him beat out.
Probably Jeff Monken.
By a little bit.
But I don't think Newberry does.
I don't think so either. I think
It'd
it's
be
Monken and then Traylor, and then that's it. So that's going to help the way that UTSA plays, because there is some continuity there and there is some ability to really take a step forward and win games. He's been very vocal about how disappointing some of these seasons have been, because the expectations are sky high. They will be again at UTSA. How do you combat that, and how do you have success?
And that's one of the great things about Jeff Traylor is he is never going to tell you a lie. He will be completely upfront with you about everything, whether you're doing a game with him, whether you're watching or attending one of his press conferences, he is so vocal about being disappointed. He's also vocal when they're successful. He'll give his players credit where credit is due. But I think despite all that, he really loves on his team and loves on his guys. And we talk about the players at Temple being bought in. That's the vibe that I got when I covered some of UTSA's games a year ago. The triangle of toughness, everything that they believe in. And I think the fact that he's been at UTSA for a while now will bode well for that. I think the biggest thing, though, for them, though, is getting over that hump and finding the success that Jeff Traylor wants, because they've tasted it, they've gotten close, but they haven't been able to close the door. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's where you're going to see a shift in the mentality. Last year it was, we didn't start the season well in 23. We want to be, or excuse me, in 24. We want to be better in 25 starting the season, but it was a tougher schedule. This is a tough schedule too.
Yeah.
And as long as you stay committed, I mean, they've had some struggles with Texas State. Of course, Texas is going to rebuild. They're going to be very good, and Arch Manning is back. They may be a legitimate college football playoff and national championship contender. But you got to win the games in your conference, and that's where the focus needs to be. And UTSA has a chance to do that. They've always played great defense down in San Antonio. I expect that again today. Some of their best transfers are defensive players. Joel Rogers was a four-star high school recruit that started at LSU. If he plays again, he's going to be an NFL caliber secondary player. Eddie Smith, defensive lineman from Texas Tech. Eze Zondu, I think I'm saying his name semi-right. California transfer comes over, and then they go get a four-star tight end from Florida A&M and Miles Campbell. Brandon Young Jr. was a backup tight end at North Texas, but still played very well in limited minutes. Big body, 6'5", 240 pounds. He's going to be a blocking tight end that's going to pave the way for the running backs that they've traditionally had. They don't have some of those guys that they've had in the past, like a Shad Banks off the second level. They don't have the Robert Henry Jr. to roll with anymore. But this is a UTSA team that plays good defense, and they recruit the Texas area well. They're going to have to reload, replace, but I think this is a different mindset going into 26.
Yeah, the recruiting of the Texas area is one of the things that Jeff Traylor is known for. So how well does he do that going into 2026? We'll see how it plays out. We'll also have to see Tulane with a new head coach. John Summerall goes to Florida. Will Hall's now at the helm of the Green Wave. He's been there in different stints, and so he loves New Orleans. He's back, and he's going to open up with Duke.
Oh, yeah, opening up with Duke. It's not necessarily the Mensa revenge game anymore because he's not at Duke anymore. That's a separate topic of conversation.
We don't have enough time.
Yeah, we don't have enough time to go through that one and all the impending lawsuits off of it. But the way that this schedule lines up, it's very similar to what we've seen in the past under Coach Summerall. They want to be tested early, but with games that they can win. They've beaten Duke in the past. They took Kansas State down to the wire 2 seasons ago. And they, of course, ended up beating K-State the first time they beat him back in that Cotton Bowl season under Willie Fritz. So, good teams early. But again, as I said early with some of those other teams, they're one of the rare squads in the American that starts with 4 non-conference games. And then you get to get into the meat of your schedule and play the games that really matter the most. Army is a tough one to get off the bat. We saw that with North Texas last year. A team that was probably talent-wise better than most, but they open with Army on the road, and then you got to have an overtime game to pull that out. That's exactly what Tulane's going to have to deal with here. That's a tough maneuver between Southern Miss, who's under a first-year head coach, Kansas State, who's under a new head coach. You've got to change in a couple of leaderships there. But you know what Army's going to bring, and you still can't slow it down a lot of the time.
And I think that being your first conference game is also so tough, especially when you put those first 4 non-conference games, because at least when you're within conference play, and I know in the American, there's a lot of different head coaches, both this year and the year before, but you at least have somewhat of an idea of what these programs look like. So you're preparing for 4 non-conference games with different head coaches, and then you're starting with a triple option team. And so I think the prep for that.
Good luck.
Yeah, have fun. Will Hall, when coaches sleep in their office, that's probably going to be what's happening with him and his coordinators for those first 5 weeks of the season. But I think when you take a look at the rest of their schedule as well, it's still tough. They have Memphis at home, they have Tulsa at home, but they're at Rice, at South Florida. So I think that, man, this is going to be a tough one for the defending American champions. Here's the thing, though, with Tulane. It doesn't matter all the time who's at the helm. That program has found ways to win the last couple of years.
You can never count them out. You really can't. And I think it's interesting when you put these 4 games as like notable games up. All 4 of these are in the first 7 of their schedule. So it is front-loaded. But you don't get a break down the stretch either. You got to go play North Texas at home. You got to go on the road to play South Florida on Thanksgiving weekend. And what that's going to ultimately look like is, and maybe that final South Florida game, that could be a win and punch your ticket to an American Conference Championship game type of feel, especially if Tulane lives up to the expectations. But good luck to Will Hall. I think he's a phenomenal fit for the job. They wanted to continue the momentum and not necessarily go through an entire regime change again, which I don't blame them. They only did it 3 seasons ago. So we'll see what it builds early, but it's going to be a tough one from the jump. Last one on the list.
Oof.
The Tulsa Golden Hurricane.
I've been excitedly waiting to talk about this schedule and what Trey Lamb is building. They had the Portal House in the offseason, which I think was one of the coolest things, where they rented out an Airbnb property and then had all their coaches staying there. They hosted visits. They did all the recruiting calls within this house in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I think it garnered them about 20 different transfers in that time frame. I think that new Tulsa that Trey Lamb's trying to build, I think it might take another step forward this year.
And guess what? The Portal House worked. They found some dogs. Jaden Matkins is a guy that I've covered a couple times throughout his career, but at Louisiana Tech most recently, defensive lineman, get some big burly defensive linemen up front. Jimmy Callaway, wide receiver from Tulane, who we talked about a couple times making impacts. He made a couple big time grabs last season. He goes to Tulsa. They get the Baylor transfer, Caldra Williford, the corner, who was an electrifying slot corner that can kind of bounce back and forth between the boundary and the nickel position. Seth Davis, who I called a couple games of his last year at Mississippi State, burner. 5'7" running back. He may not be the biggest running back you're ever going to see, but guess what? If you blink, you may not see him at all, and he's gone. They have some speed. They have some playmakers. They have some high-level transfers. This is the most talented team that Trey Lamb has had in the 2 seasons. They beat that team down at the end last year in a low-scoring, gritty type of game, that Oklahoma State win.
They
got to
opened
go
up
on
with
the
North
road.
Texas, though.
Oh yeah, it's North Texas Mean Green. They didn't beat them either, though.
No. But
last
they'll
year.
know.
But they the way that Oklahoma State rebuilds with Eric Morris and company.
Oof.
We're about to give our top 5 games of the year. Just a quick thought. That's probably going to be one of my top 5 games
It's
of
so
the year.
exciting. Like the fact that it's Eric Morris with that Oklahoma State team, Drew Mestamaker's there, and Tulsa has an idea of how to play them with this reloaded roster that you just mentioned.
And Arkansas has Ryan Silverfield, who comes over from Memphis. So you get 2 former American Conference coaches initially, and Trey Lamb, who had the swagger last year, who had the buy-in, didn't have the record nor the talent to really compete. Just like I said with Temple, I think this is a second-year jump. You're going to talk about that as the year goes on. And if it's not a second-year jump, I think they're still moving things in the right direction. But now it's time to win games. You built it last year. You set a foundation. You set a reason to be excited. This is a year to capitalize on it.
I could not agree more. I think with the way that he's been talking about this program, the way that Trey Lamb wants to build this program, I think this schedule, too, puts them in a good position where they can get some big wins early. Even if they don't beat Oklahoma State or Arkansas and they're competitive in those, I think it bodes well when you get into conference play. You mentioned that Oklahoma State Tulsa game being one of your top 5.
They also have Damari Alston, who I really like, too. I didn't even see his name on here until just now. He's transferred from Auburn, another burner type of running back. They're going to have weapons. This Tulsa team's going to have some weapons next year. Sorry to
No, you're good. I think I cut you off during that rant, so now we're even. We're 1 for 1. So we're just going to go back and forth on that. But as I was saying, Oklahoma State, Tulsa, one of your top 5 games. What else do you have?
Yeah, here are my top 5 games. And of course, number 1 on the list, it's Army-Navy, December 12th. Can't wait. That one getting played up at MetLife Stadium, East Rutherford, New Jersey. Can't wait for that one. And then you got number 2 on my list. I said it. That Tulane South Florida game could be a de facto title game preview, or even just a spot in the title game on the line.
Okay.
I mean, every year as of late, it feels like South Florida and Tulane, no matter who's the head coach, is going to be in the conversation.
Okay.
I don't anticipate that changing, and that's why I have that game there. Same thing for North Texas and Tulane. I mean, these are 2 new coaching staffs, but a rematch of last year's American Conference Championship game. North Texas hits the transfer portal heavy. The only team that probably did it better was Tulane. And so I think there's a conversation to be had there as North Texas returns to the scene of the crime where they lost in the title game last year down in New Orleans. I like this Memphis-Boise State game. I could have thrown the Memphis-UNLV game there, too, just because I like it when American Conference teams challenge themselves with not only Power 4 possibilities, but other really talented group of 5 teams. And I think that's one where Memphis is going to try and set the tone early against a good Boise State squad. And then, yes, Tulsa against Eric Morris. This is the battle for Oklahoma outside of the Sooners because Tulsa beat Oklahoma State last year. Trey Lamb is 1-0 against the Cowboys. I think this is going to be another fun game. You're going to see Drew Mestamaker. You're going to see Caleb Hawkins and Wyatt Young and some of these fan favorite names that we had in the American last year at North Texas. Doesn't matter. I think Trey Lamb and company are going to be really good there. Is it going to be a win on the road at Boone Pickens Stadium? Maybe not. Who knows? But I think they're going to show out well in that first matchup.
The Battle of Oklahoma, I think, and it's at Tulsa this year, though, isn't it?
No, it's at Oklahoma State.
It is at Oklahoma State?
Yeah, I thought it was at Oklahoma.
I believe it was at.
Was it in Stillwater last year?
I think it was in Stillwater last
My
year.
bad. So, yeah, it's even at home. There you go.
Ooh, so that's another added benefit.
H.A. Chapman Stadium's going to be rocking. They better have 18,000
I was going to
plus.
say, all right. We got to take a look at my top 5 games. I think we have some similarities on here. Look at that, Army-Navy, because it's America's game, and it is one of the coolest football games in college football. The next one for me is South Florida and East Carolina. I think we talked about East Carolina, what Blake Harrell has done. Can he revamp it? And Brian Hartline then at South Florida. I think that could be a potential game that could determine a lot of things of who's going to be in the American Conference Championship game based on what we've seen from those head coaches. North Texas and Indiana, and I put that on there because I want to see our team play, one of our American teams play the defending national champion. And I'm excited to see how Neil Brown and his new players and his new staff handle that environment. I think no matter who you are as a football fan, everybody's going to be tuned into Indiana's first game. I think it's going to be great exposure for the conference.
Oh, the nation's going to be watching them raise a banner for the first time
in
history. I mean, that's wild.
Just to even fathom that. I mean, for you, you're a North Texas alum. Like, how cool is that they're going to be in that
I'm trying to find tickets to that game and make sure I can go up there.
Okay,
that's what I'm excited about.
All right. Well,
I'm already kind of making maneuvers to try and get to get up to Bloomington, which I love Indiana as a state. I think it's a great sports state. The only problem with the American Conference is they don't have an Indiana team in it, because I think they love sports so much, and that's one where that's going to take center stage for the state, for the country, and North Texas gets to be a part of that. And the best part about it is,
what?
If they end up playing spoiler, you would never hear the end of it for multiple reasons. Because of this reason in the American Conference, and because North Texas would play spoiler to that party. Oh, that would be awesome.
Kyle is even more excited now
now
for
that
Indiana,
I'm talking
North
you
Texas.
through, I'm getting excited about it.
Yeah, so you're trying to.
I was going
to say he's fixing his list of 5. My next one, I have the Temple Penn State game on there for reasons I mentioned before. I think that 2 teams in Pennsylvania, they fight for recruits. Temple beat Penn State the last time they were in Lincoln Financial Field. I think there's a lot of momentum in that Temple program. I think it'd be a great big win for Temple and the American. I just think it's awesome. Penn State with a new head coach at the helm. A lot of things can happen. You're not sure what the program's going to look like.
Try and sneak up on them a little bit.
I think they're still going to be good. But
that stadium might be full for that one because of how many fans live in Philadelphia.
Live in Philly. Yep, exactly. So I think it's going to be a great atmosphere. And then to round things out, just as you said, Kyle, Tulsa, Oklahoma State for all of the reasons that you listed.
See, and the best part about the 2 lists that we just had is, yes, the first game and the last game are the same, but there are so many good games to get excited about in the American this year that it could be any week, any game. There's going to be something of a storyline, somewhat of a move and shake, and that's even without seeing which teams will evolve and which teams will step up or which teams are going to slip up at different times in the season. And it's going to be a really fun football season. I can't wait to break it down for you. And I'm already counting down the days to training camp, get ready to get back out in the heat of the summer and get ready for football season because it is closer than you think.
All right, so next what we're going to do, where we already looked at all the schedules, right?
Oh.
So we still have another part of the show.
There's another part of the show?
There's another part.
Wait,
I need to know, let's look at our notes. I need you to give me your toughest schedule. Which program? We're not going to do toughest and easiest. I'm going to call them toughest and not as tough because I don't want anybody to get upset.
No, let's call them cupcakes.
Okay, well, let's start with your
toughest
toughest
and
first.
Cupcake.
Give me your toughest schedule. What team has your toughest
I think
schedule?
Memphis. I said that earlier in the show that I was probably going to mention them at this point. I think North Texas has a tough schedule too.
Okay.
But for Memphis to start in week 0, you go from the Memphis area to to face 2 of the West Coast teams that are some of the best in the group of 6 in UNLV and Boise State. And then you turn around in the American Conference and you've got games at Tulane, at South Florida, at Navy, along with ECU and Army also being on the schedule. The reason I put Memphis above them is because North Texas, even though they have Indiana and they have some of those other teams, they don't have the gauntlet of an American Conference schedule that Memphis has to deal with. So I think the Tigers, even though I just told you that they're going to be contenders, this is going to be a challenge, and the new coaching staff is going to have their ducks in a row, their Tigers ready to pounce, because this is going to be a tough schedule, but I still believe that they're talented enough to do it.
I agree with you. I think that Memphis has a very tough schedule, and I think it was tough for me to pick the toughest schedule because of some of the opponents that these American teams are playing in addition to their conference schedule. So I kind of had two that I was deciding between Tulsa and Florida Atlantic because I couldn't pick one. And I would even throw Memphis in that mix. But for me with Tulsa, I think playing Oklahoma State, they're going to play Arkansas. I think another key for me is playing all three option teams and then also Tulane. I think when you have to play all three of those opponents, it makes preparation for those games that much more difficult. And so that's why I threw that one in there, especially because I covered a lot of Tulsa games last year, and that was one thing that they spoke a lot about, was getting ready for those option teams and the challenges that presented. So that's why I have Tulsa on there. And
they also play at the Alamo Dome, too.
Yeah.
They got to play at UTSA.
At UTSA. So like throw that
tough.
one in there as well. I should have even put that on my list of reasons. And then my other, in terms of Florida Atlantic, they open up with Florida, and I think they have South Florida on their schedule. They have East Carolina on their schedule, and they also play those three option teams, which again, I don't know, for me, watching the way that coaches prepare and those discussions that I've had, I think that presents such a challenge, in addition to playing, P4 teams and some of the better teams in the American.
Well, and those are two second-year head coaches that are trying to take a step forward. I mean, you look at what Tulsa tried to do last year to build a foundation. Caden Veldkamp and the quarterback at Florida Atlantic tried to do that with Zach Kittley last year in Boca Raton. So I agree with you. I mean, those are two tough schedules to deal with. Now, who do you think is the next upper echelon in terms of easiest schedules to deal with?
My not as tough schedule.
Not as tough.
Is South Florida.
You wanted me to use a better term.
Yeah, I'm going to say South Florida is my not as tough schedule. And I say that because it's not totally their fault. We already talked about them having Alabama on the schedule, then having to change it, but their non-conference games took a hit. And I think because of that, that's why I'm putting them as my not as tough. Now, they still have some formidable conference opponents as well. So I think that there's no such thing as an easy schedule. They still have to play East Carolina. They still have to play Memphis. They still have to play Tulane. So their conference schedule, I think, is tougher, but it's those non-conference opponents that, in my opinion, don't match some of our other teams' non-conference schedules.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think the non-conference schedule is a winnable slate. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
it's a winnable
I think that's
slate.
a good way to put it.
And part of that, I've already outlined, was not their fault, but
Yeah.
that's what they were faced with, and that's the schedule that they have on the board. Sometimes that can actually play in your favor. And with a new first-year head coach, you can kind of play.
Yeah, for sure.
You can play catch-up in a certain extent to try and get your team ready through the first month of the season. So South Florida might actually be in a pretty good spot for that. Mine is Navy. Okay. I think when you look at the way that their neutral site games, yes, you've got Notre Dame and you got at Army. Both of those don't count as conference games, at least unless Navy and Army end up meeting in the American title game, which we outlined earlier with the schedule that both of those teams have, could very well be in the conversation depending on what the talent level is for Navy. But then your toughest road game of the year, I would argue, is at UTSA. And as we mentioned, the only teams that are seemingly immune to the curse of the Alamo Dome are service academy teams. And so I think Navy has a winnable schedule across the board. I still think they're going to have to replace what they did last year in a major way, because you don't have the Horvaths or the Teskas, the Hayden Rice. You don't have those guys available anymore. Now you got to change it, and they're going to have a chance to kind of ease into it as well. A couple road games early at Florida Atlantic against a team trying to take a next step, at UAB, a team that's very unproven in this league at the moment, but still winnable games when you really boil it down.
We talked about the easiest and toughest, but who do you think's going to surprise us? Like, North Texas was a surprise for me last
Absolutely.
year. 100%. Like, I don't know. That's what I'm thinking as we sit here. We're like, easiest, toughest. Like, these are going to be the good games. And we could get to November and be like, wow,
That's
not what happened at all.
That's my thing with Florida Atlantic.
Yeah.
I think Florida Atlantic has the quarterback, they have the continuity, and they have playmakers, and they have team speed. If they play better brand of defense this year, kind of like what North Texas did. North Texas could not play defense in 2024. That was where we were questioning. And they bring in a new defensive coordinator, and they bring in a new defensive unit, and they've kind of revamped that side of the ball enough to where, hey, they were able to win some games at a high level in 2025. I think Florida Atlantic can make a similar jump. They can play offense. They can pass the ball around with the better of them. I think as long as they play defense, then you feel really good about what they can do on that in that schedule. The other one, as like kind of an honorable mention, if you don't mind, Tulsa.
Yeah.
You just mentioned they're one of the toughest schedules in the conference, and I don't disagree. But even with that, I still think Trey Lamb's going to take a second step, and they're going to be really good. It wouldn't be a surprise for me if Temple wins, right? If Temple is better this year, I said that earlier. I believe they're going to do that. Tulsa's going to be a little tougher because of the schedule that they have at hand, but I do think they have the ability to do it, and that would be a surprise, but not necessarily a huge surprise at the end of the day.
That was going to be my surprise, but again, I don't think as big of a surprise as it might have been if they, in Trey Lamb's first year, like ran the table. So I think I'm calling Tulsa my surprise team, but I would not be surprised based on what they did in the offseason, what Trey Lamb is trying to build there. And I believe in them a little bit more to call them a surprise, but they're still not like at my top as, like you said, Temple or something like that.
Yeah, there are some really good mid-level teams in this conference that are going to challenge, because I don't think East Carolina or Tulane or South Florida are going to take steps backwards. I think these teams are going to take steps forward and start challenging. And top to bottom, I think it's wide open for this league going into 2026. And I think it was that way last year to a certain extent because of all the coaching changes and all the switch-ups. And if we were taught anything, continuity plays a factor.
Right.
And the coaches that won last year were second-year and third-year head coaches that made it to the American Conference title games. So with that being said, watch out for Jeff Traylor. Watch out for Temple, and watch out for some of these other schools that have had coaches in position for the last couple of years, because you're seeing the top 4 teams in the conference last year change their head coaches. I think that's going to provide a little bit of parity in this league.
Well, parity was a word we used a lot, and chaos was the word that we used all season long last year, but I think that's what's made the American so exciting and so much fun to be a part of, is the way that these teams rise when they are under second, third-year head coaches, and the way that they surprise us as well with, early on success or maybe some late season success. So I'm excited. I know it's only March, but it is all.
How many days until August 29th?
Too many, Kyle, but that being said, football season
180 days from the moment we filmed this.
That's like an elementary school year in Pennsylvania. Or at least it was when I was in.
That shows how smart you are. That's where your mind went.
Well, that's where my parents were teachers. So an elementary school year away from college football season.
There you go.
You ready for it?
I'm not ready for it, but we'll get there.
We'll eventually get there. For Kyle Youmans, I'm Maria Trivelpiece. This has been a special edition of All-American, the schedule release version. We'll see you in August.